an honor.
And it's an honor to lift our voice and sing
To the living God.
to the living God.
No one can deny.
No one can deny
that Jesus Christ.
that Jesus Christ is the Most High.
So I always like to start out with a story. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to all the friends and the family. I'm overwhelmed with love, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into this sermon. So I don't want to give you the topic yet, but I want to share a story with you. Back when I was in college, I was a sophomore in college. I was getting ready to be a sophomore in college. I got this car. And this car, I named her. She was a 2005 Nissan Altima. She was pewter. She was like a tan color. I called her Ginger. Ginger was everything that I wanted. I mean, everything that I remember going to the car dealership with my dad. He's negotiating. We left the car dealership. We're going back. But Ginger was perfect. She was everything that I wanted. Anytime that I had a problem with Ginger, it was minimal problems. You know, need some gas, I can do that. Need some air in the tire, I could do that too. The minimal things. But Ginger started to get a little bit older. And I can't necessarily say that I am a mechanic, but what I will say is that as Ginger got older, I found myself having to depend on a mechanic to fix her. I know y'all trying to figure out where I'm going. Just go with me. I'm going somewhere. Ginger was perfect to me. She was so perfect to me. She was everything that I needed. So one day, I was getting up and I was getting in the car. I'm on my way to work. I get in the car, I turn the car on. I put my foot on the brake. I turned the gear shift. It didn't move. And I said, okay, well, that's weird. So I start jerking at it to see if it was gonna move. It never moved. This was my car, y'all. This was my baby. And it never moved. And so I said, okay, well, let me turn it off and cut it back on. Maybe I just didn't press the brake hard enough. So I put my foot on that brake and I cut it on and I tried to move that gear shift. Still didn't move. And so I was a little heated at this point because I was piece. There's this little silver piece, and he lifted it up. It's about this big. He lifted it up, and he took something sharp, and he stuck it down in that piece. You already see, you know. He stuck it down in that piece. And as he pressed the gas, and he was pushing the utensil that he was using, he moved that gear shift, and it began to move. He said, for some reason, when you press your brake, this button is supposed to release, but it's not releasing. And I said, okay. And so he said, in order for you to get the car to work, you have to press this button and move the gear shift. I said, okay. So then I was a little upset because my perfect Ginger became imperfect. She wasn't what I wanted her to be. But the good thing about it was she was still able to go from point A to point B. I still just had to put a little bit of work in it. I looked at that as a weakness. Like, how am I? And don't let somebody be in a car with me. Do you know how embarrassing that is? How embarrassing that is. I have to stick something in here and put my foot, and that's embarrassing. So now I got a little bit of pride because I'm like, nobody can ride with me until I get this fixed. But it was still able to move. It was still able to go, even in that imperfection. And so today I want to talk to you all about imperfectly perfect. Imperfectly perfect. I want you to go with me to 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. We're going to start at verse 5. 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. We're going to start at verse 5, and we're going to read to verse 10. This is coming from the Apostle Paul. It says, I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself except about my weaknesses. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say. Or because of these surpassingly great revelations, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So I just want to give you a little bit of background. Let's talk a little bit about Paul for a second. Paul was an apostle. Paul had a very interesting life. He was a Jew, and specifically Jews were put into 3 categories. The category of Jew that he was put in, he was a Pharisee. And Pharisees were looked at to be pious. In other words, most of the time when God says somebody's pious in the Bible, pretty much what he's saying is they're a hypocrite. They do one thing and they say something else. And so he was a Jew, he was a Pharisee. Pharisees were considered self-righteous. They were considered prideful. They believed in their own way. So it's pretty much, they just kind of did what they wanted to do. And so Paul specifically, he was a great persecutor of the church. And he wanted to destroy the Lord's influence on the people. Now we also know that Paul was formerly Saul. And so what happened, Saul, with his bad self, he decided that he was going to go to Damascus. And he was on the road to Damascus ready to arrest some Christians. And on his way to Damascus, he got knocked down on his horse. And Christ spoke to him. And he was blinded for 3 days, and he regained his vision. And in that time, he was converted, and he believed in the Messiah for him to be exactly who he was. And it's interesting to me because we see that even in all of the things that Paul did against the church, God still used him for his glory. He became a preacher of the gospel, and he ended up bringing the Gentiles into the faith. So let me just tell you, it doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what you're in. God can use anybody that he sees fit to use. Let Paul be your example. So to go into this text, Paul, he's writing these letters to the church in Corinth. And so there's a series of letters that we see that are written to the church in Corinth. And so when we look specifically at this, there's a couple of things that we see. And so I started looking at this because Paul was talking about weaknesses. Sometimes we don't like to talk about weaknesses. Let's just be honest, we don't like to talk about it. I don't really like to talk about it, but I got to talk about it because he said do it, so I'm going to do it. So when we look at these weaknesses, when you're on a job interview and somebody says, well, what are your weaknesses? Oh, I don't have any. That's what you want to say because that's the perfect answer. And so what God revealed to me is that we live in a world system where perfection is everything. It's okay to be perfect. We establish ourselves, and the goal is to be perfect. I don't make any mistakes. I don't do anything wrong. I didn't cuss you out. I didn't get in that fight. I don't have any problems. That's how the world, we have so gone into this way of I have to look a certain way. I have to talk a certain way. I have to be a certain way. And so what I realize is that we've gotten caught up into the world system of perfection. And so when I looked up this definition of perfection, it means free from flaws or defects, faultless. Free from flaws, defects, and faultless. And so We have so many systems in our society that just makes perfection. It's just exactly what it is. You get an A, that's perfect. You have a perfect life, you don't have any problems. You have a perfect mate, he doesn't have any problems. You have a perfect body, it's got to look a certain way. We have so many images in our society that says perfection is the way to be. But this is where God said, but wait a minute. Look at my word. This is not what my word says. And so what I had to understand is our problem is that we've taken the world system of perfection and we try to bring it into the spiritual world. And so we see here as we get into this text that God never designed us to be perfect. He never designed us to have all our I's dotted and all our T's crossed. It is that simple weakness in us, that challenging situation that keeps us on our knees and keeps us praying, that thing that just won't seem to leave us alone, that temptation that seems to come over and over again. That's what God is using to show you that you can be used by him. And so what I've come to realize is perfection is not real, nor is it attainable. Now, why do we have imperfections? Why do we have imperfections? If we look at the text, I want us to look at verse number 7, I believe. Verse number 7. It says, or because of these surpassingly great revelations, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh. And so what I had to realize is that so often we put up facades. We put up these images. This is my life. It's great. Never been better. And you go to the house and you welling and crying and moaning and screaming, wanting to know when your change is going to come. And so what I understand here is that God didn't design for it to be this way. He didn't design for us to walk and feel like, because think about it this way. You got the house that you want. You got the car that you want. You have the mate that you want. You have the job that you want. You have everything, no problems, no situations. What do you need God for? What you need him for? You already have everything that you need. Why is he even there? If it wasn't for my tears, I wouldn't know that God is a comforter. If it wasn't for my pain, I would not know that he was a protector and that he's a healer and that he's a deliverer and he is a restorer. And so while we wrapped up in our minds that it's okay to be perfect, that wasn't his design for us to be perfect, because it's that very weakness that keeps us bonded to him. It is that very weakness that keeps us close knit to the Father, that keeps us on our knees and keeps us in prayer. So why do we have imperfections? Why do we have these imperfections? First of all, we have these imperfections to keep us humble. I don't need what you got. I'm good. That's how we would act if we had everything. I got my money. I got my house. I got my car. I have everything that I need. I'm good. See, you're conceited. You're arrogant. Nobody wants to deal with you. Nobody wants to deal with that. So God allows these imperfections to happen to keep us humble. He wants to keep us from being arrogant and conceited. And the most important thing is he wants to keep us dependent on God. He is a very present help in the time of trouble, and he's designed it to be that way. So what is your thorn? What's your thorn? You don't have to say it, but I just want you to think about it. You know that one thing that you like, Lord, if you don't help me right now, I'm going off. Is it dealing with addiction? Is it giving into temptation? Is it a negative attitude? Is it a challenging situation? Is it the bad relationship or the bad marriage? Is it the sexual impurity? Is it the cheating? Is it the lying? Is it the stealing? Or is it simply your tongue? You talk too much. Is that what is keeping you? But see, here's the beauty in this. Even though that's a weakness, that's the very thing that God is using to deliver you. That's the very thing that God is using to keep you in a place with him. And so what I love here, if we look at the next verse, it says, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Now, we've talked about some possible thorns. And to be honest, we have to deal with it. We have to say, God, here I am. Just as imperfect as I am. I got this. I got that problem. I have this issue. This is me. See, sometimes we like to go to God about other people and other things when we the problem. I'm the problem, God. I'm not even going to act like I'm the problem. So help me. Help me. Because when God begins to help you, he's going to change your outlook and your perspective about the situations and the things that you're dealing with. So what does my thorn lead to when I leave it unnoticed, when I act like I got all my stuff together and it's really not together? When I act like I don't have any issues. So what does my thorn lead to? One of the things it leads to is pride, arrogance, and conceit, guilt, shame. God, I messed up. I did wrong. And the enemy, that's a tactic of the enemy. Anytime you are in a place of guilt and shame. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not condoning sin. I'm not saying that we should just go out here and free will and do whatever we want to do. No, that's not what God, the wrath of God is real. The wrath of God is real. But at the same token, we make some mistakes sometimes. We weren't created to be perfect, and God knows that. That's why he gave us grace. That's why he gave us grace. And so what the enemy would desire is for when you make that mistake, when you yield to that temptation, that you have guilt, that you have shame. I can't go around those church people today because they know what I did. I can't do this because they know I can't. Or you beating yourself up. And your mind is all jacked up because you're telling yourself, I can't live because I did X, Y, Z, and nobody knows but you and God. But you're beating yourself up. And so that weakness has gotten to a place that you have not allowed yourself to be used by God. So comparing yourself to others. Well, I see what Sister So-and-so got over here. I see what she got, and she seems perfect. Why I can't have what she has? That's not meant for you. If you're supposed to have it, you're going to have it. And so fear and doubt and rejection and depression. Y'all, depression is real. It's real. And times that we put ourselves in isolation, we allow that door, that gateway to be open to depression. This stuff is real. We beat up on ourselves, and before you know it, it's day 1 in our room, day 2 in our room, day 3 we haven't talked to anybody, day 4 we haven't communicated, and before you know it, you have totally disconnected yourself from the world. That's a tactic of the enemy. Depression, tactic of the enemy. It leads to selfishness. It leads to insecurity. It leads to frustration because you're wondering, God, why can't I get myself together? Why is it like this? Why do I have this problem? Why is it that this child is not acting the way I want them to act? Why is it that this coworker is getting on my last nerves and I'm trying to deal with it? Why is this happening? And so you get to a place of frustration and you're questioning God, what is the purpose? And one of the biggest things, when you leave that thorn unnoticed, generational curses. They're real. They're real. There's some pain that we've dealt with that we leave ignored. There's some heartache that we've dealt with that we leave ignored. And instead of going to the Father and saying, God, I need your help, I can't do this, we act as if it's not there. But then when a situation comes, it starts to creep up. And another situation comes, it starts to creep up. And God cannot use us because we haven't acknowledged that we need him. We haven't acknowledged that he is our help. We haven't acknowledged that he is the one that can keep us and sustain us. Now, how do you deal with your thorn? The first thing you need to do, if we look at verse 8, he said, 3 times I pleaded. 3 times I pleaded. He didn't say I just asked God to take it away. He said 3 times I pleaded. When you plead with somebody, when you make a plea, you are begging. You're desperate. You ever pleaded for something? That one time, God, if you take this away, I promise I won't do it again. You know when you've been on your knees and you've been crying and saying, God, if you just take me out this situation, I promise you. Now 2 weeks later, you go and do the same thing again. But there's grace. God still loves us. But he pleaded. He said, God, I'm working for you. I'm doing all these things for you. But it's this weakness. Now, we don't know what the weakness is. We don't know if the weakness was something internal, or we don't know if the weakness was just a challenging situation that Paul was up against. But that thorn was there. And he pleaded and he said, God, what is it? I just want you to take this away from me. And he said, this is something from the enemy. The enemy is used to torment me. Now, here's something that I love about God. What I love about God is that even though the enemy tries to come to target us, even though the enemy tries to come to throw his darts, we still serve a loving God that protects us and keeps us. And so I found it very interesting when I'm reading the text and he said, no, I'm not taking your thorn away. I'm not taking it away. Like, you can't just have what you want. And sometimes we get comfortable. We just feel like, God, I can ask you for this and you can just give me whatever it is that I ask for. That's why it's so important that we stay in constant prayer, because God will tell you no sometimes. He will tell you no. And in this situation, he said no. Because that is beauty in that. It's beauty in your pain. It's beauty in the things that you've had to deal with. And that's exactly what it was that he was telling Paul. So what do you do to deal with your thorn? First of all, you have to remove the veil and actually admit that you have some imperfections. You got to remove it. No more masking. No more fake smiles when you know. Now, I'm not saying that we got to walk around being like, woe is me, and this is just the worst day ever in life. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it's important for us to understand that even if we don't have to tell everybody our business, but we got to go to the Father, because he already knows us. He already knows what we can do. He already knows our strengths and he knows our weaknesses. But who are we to think that we can just act like we don't have a problem? You go to him and say, God, this is what it is, and I'm giving that to you. So first of all, you have to understand that your personal strength is limited. We're really not as strong as we think we are. How many situations have you been in where you just said, God, if that was you, that was you. I can't even take the credit for that. That's the way God designed it, to give us strength. To give us strength. It's nothing good that we've done. There's no perfect behavior that we have that allows us to be able to get to that point. But our strength lies in God. And most importantly, when we deal with our thorn, we have to pray. Prayer life is so important. I think I've realized that over the last few months, that prayer is so important. Y'all, it's some stuff that you just trying to handle on your own. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. You trying to pay that bill or do this and do that and then all your resources exhausted. Everything that you try to put together, the plans fail. You get to a point that you have to depend on God. But let me tell you that before we try to do all of our resources and use all of our resources, let's go to the Father first. That's what he's there for. He owns everything, and so all we need is to get what we need from him. It is he who can allow us to get to the place that we need to be. So we have to pray and let God speak. We got to listen to God. We have to listen. And so some of you all are probably thinking, how do I even listen to God? God will speak to you, but you have to take the time to commune with him. You can't expect God to speak to you when you don't talk to him. You talked to him 4 weeks ago when somebody was about to rear end you and you said, Jesus, I need you. That's not how he designed it. Our prayer life has to be constant. Our prayer life has to be something, because even in our prayer life, that gives us the strength that we need. That we have to stay prayed up. We have to ask the Lord to fill us up. We have to ask the Lord to give, God, I can't do this on my own, and I need your spirit. I need your strength. And so when we look at this, it says, now let's go to verse 9. It says in verse 9, it says, but he says to me, after he asked the Lord, I was given this thorn in my flesh. It was a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. This is my favorite part. For my power is made perfect in weakness. His power is made perfect in weakness. We don't have to be strong. We get power from him. So our perfection lies in his grace. Our perfection lies in being dependent on him. And so we don't have to worry about that world system of perfection because it's his power that is made perfect in our weakness. And then when we look at this part right here, it says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses. How do you delight in weaknesses? You don't know what I'm dealing with. You don't know what my week was like. You don't know the pain that I feel. How am I supposed to delight in a weakness? How am I supposed to take courage in weakness? That doesn't even make good sense. That's what you're thinking. It says, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions. When folk talk about you. When people scheme and plot against you, it says delight in that. Delight in that. In those difficult times when you're like, God, I can't see my way out. I am in a dark pit right now and I need to see some light. I can't make it without you. But it is in that God says, for when I am weak, I'm really strong. When I'm weak, how do you look at weakness as really a strength? In the world system, that doesn't work. If you're weak, you just weak. You don't have it. But it says, for when I'm weak, I got to stay tapped to the Father. I got to stay connected with the Father. And the Father gives me every single thing that I need. So when I'm weak, I might look like I'm out. I might look like I lost it. I might look like I'm on my last leg. I might look like I'm beat up and toe up. I might look like it, but in my weakness, I'm really strong. So no more do we tell ourselves what we can't do, because in God's strength we can do everything. It is his power that gives us the ability to do every single thing that we need to get done. And how great a God it is, for when I'm weak, I'm really strong. So when you get to that hard place in life, when you get to that challenging situation, you don't become defeated. You don't allow the enemy power over you, because if you allow him power over you, he's gonna take as much as he can take. He gonna beat you up and tear you up. God gave us power. He gave us power. And so we have to operate in that power and understand that our strength is in God. Our strength is in God. So when we look at this last point here, how does God deal with my thorn? He gives us an unlimited supply of grace. He gives us an unlimited supply. Thank God for grace. We've been some places. We can think back. We've done some things. We've said some things. We've thought some things. We started some stuff. We've been in the middle of stuff. But it was when we went to the Father and we said, God, this is what it is. First of all, you got to have the want to do better. That's another thing. You can't just say, well, this is me. This is just how I am. You take it and you leave it. No. That's not the way. You have to want. You have to want to change. You have to want to be so connected to the Father that you want to be. You have to be in a place where you want to be pleasing to him. God, I really want to please you. I really want to do right by you. I don't want to play church no more. I don't want to play this thing. Like, I'm really serious about what I want. I want to be used by you. And so first you have to admit that you have the power to do what it is that he's called you to do. You've got to admit that. So he gives us an unlimited supply of grace. And the beauty is that his grace is more than enough. His grace is more than enough. His grace is more than enough. It's more than what money can buy. Because in his grace you can get peace. In his grace you can get understanding. In his grace you can get clarity. There's so many things in his grace that you can receive. And so his grace is more than enough. Now, what will you experience when you surrender your thorn? So you remember how I said we have to be in a place where we actually have to say, God, this is what it is, and I'm giving it to you, and I really want to take the time to make this change. So he gives you that power, and he gives you that strength and weakness, and when you have trouble, he gives you joy. You got joy. Y'all, it's a mind thing. Our minds will take us to some places. Our minds will jack us up if we allow to. We allow it to. But it is in trouble. When trouble comes, you don't say, oh, God, here it comes. Here it is. Oh, God. You take joy in that. You say, God, all right, it's me and you. What we going to do? You got it. You in front. What? You take joy in trouble because in trouble, God perfects you. He perfects your character. So you could probably think about a few years ago, maybe when you was younger, when somebody said something out the way to you, and how you used to respond to them. Yeah. When that trouble comes now, you like, okay, I see you. I see it. You're not going to do it today, God. You going to help me, right? Tell me what to do, because when that trouble comes, your mind changes and you're like, God, okay, this is what you grow and you develop in him. It's all about becoming mature Christians. That's what it is. Not being in the same place, not being a Christian for 20 years and still a toddler in Christ. No, that's not what he designed for it to be. That's not what he designed for it to be. He designed for us to grow and mature. Everything in the word is for us to grow and mature in him. And so we boast in our weakness. What does that mean? Do you think you go through what you go through for yourself? There's some testimonies in this room. Some of y'all in the middle of some testimonies right now. There's somebody out there, it might be somebody in here who doesn't know God, who has no clue of who he is, doesn't know anything about Jesus, nothing. But that one testimony that you had when you was up crying all night long, Lord, save my child, Lord, do this. That one testimony is what somebody else in here is dealing with, and that one testimony can draw them closer to Christ. So when you boast in your weakness, you understand that when you deal with the things you deal with, it's not about you, but it's about the glory of God. It's about him being glorified in the pain that you've had to endure. And when you allow yourself that place to be a testimony, you are being used by God. You say, God, here I am. I want to be used for you. I want to be used for you. I don't want to just play around. I got some stuff in me. Everybody in this room, whether you 2, whether you 20, whether you 120, it does not matter. All of us have gifts in us. All of us have things in us. Don't allow that guilt and that shame and that pride. Don't allow that to keep you from the gift that God has planted in you. Don't allow the constant mistakes that you made over and over again and your fear of what people are going to say about you and your fear of what they're going to do to you. Don't allow that to stand in the way of what God has for you and what God has chosen you to do. He's chosen all of us. He's chosen all of us. No, not everybody may stand here, and that's fine. But this ain't the only gift. And it doesn't mean that because somebody stands here that this gift is better than your gift. He's no respective person. God loves us, and he just wants us to be in a place where we can really surrender to him and be used by him. So as you go through your week, And as you really think, I want you to meditate. I want you to meditate on this word throughout the week. I want you in your personal time. I really want you to read this scripture, because I believe that God can pour some things into you for you. God wants to reveal who you are. You're really not who you think you are. You're so much greater. You're so much greater than what you think you are. And I want, as you read this, let God reveal some things to you. Let him show you your dirt. Ask him, God, show me my dirt. Show me my grime, because some stuff I might not think is dirt or grime, and it really is. So show me. Show me. It might be somebody telling you the same thing over and over again. Dirt and grime. God help me. I done heard it 3 times this week. God help me. Get me together, please, God. Let him pour into you as you read. So as you go through the week, I want you to think on this. Perfection in our life is only achieved through the grace of Jesus Christ. Amen. To God be the glory.
Here we stand in the presence of our Savior.
It's an honor
And it's an honor to lift our voice and
to the living God.
to the living God.
No one can deny
No one can deny
that Jesus Christ